The Kethavar had been studying primitive civilizations for 3,000 standard cycles, which gave researcher Zixthala the unshakable confidence of someone who had seen every variety of backwater stupidity the universe could produce. The crystalline being's faceted consciousness flickered through the holographic display with practiced disdain, cataloging humanity's mythological database with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for inspecting sewage samples. "Another dragon variant," Zixthala announced to the research station, its voice resonating through multiple harmonic frequencies. "This one breathes fire and hoards precious metals. How delightfully redundant." Across the observation chamber, the Vorlani collective consciousness that called itself Harmonious Understanding of Lesser Minds pulsed with what passed for amusement among hive minds. 17 identical bioforms swayed in perfect synchronization, their shared thoughts rippling through pheromone clouds. "The psychological projection is fascinating," Understanding replied, all 17 mouths moving in unison. A species that evolved on a world so devoid of meaningful predators that they had to invent threats to exercise their adrenal systems. Observe how their demons are merely exaggerated versions of their own aggressive impulses. Zixthala shifted its attention to a new file cluster, geometric patterns of light dancing across its crystalline surface. "Oh, this is rich. They have something called a Wendigo, apparently a cannibalistic humanoid that embodies the fear of starvation. Meanwhile, their homeworld produces enough biomass to support 12 billion individuals. The disconnect is almost artistic in its absurdity." The research station hummed with the quiet efficiency of academic superiority. 36 species had contributed to this comprehensive analysis of Earth's pre-contact psychological profile, and the consensus was unanimous. Humanity represented the softest, most cushioned evolutionary environment anyone had encountered. A species so thoroughly protected by their planetary circumstances that they had to manufacture trauma through storytelling. "Have you reviewed their cosmic horror subcategory?" asked Dr. Nifis, the station's Altarian xenopsychologist, the serpentine being coiled around a data terminal, its scaled head swaying as it accessed the files. "They've invented entities that apparently drive observers insane, merely by existing. The projection of inadequacy is almost painful to witness." Understanding's bioforms shifted into a new configuration, forming what the collective used as a gesture of scholarly condescension. "We analyzed those myths extensively. The great old ones, the things man was not meant to know. Classic psychological defense mechanisms for a species that never encountered genuine cosmic-scale threats. Their minds created elaborate fantasies about incomprehensible dangers to justify their evolutionary anxiety." Responses. "The technical specifications are remarkably detailed, though," Zixthala admitted, highlighting a cross-section of tentacled geometries. "This Cthulhu entity includes precise mathematical relationships for reality distortion fields, complete with dimensional folding equations that actually work. Quite sophisticated for a primitive fear response." "Compensation behavior," Dr. Nefis observed, accessing another file cluster. "Notice how their mythological threats always have specific weaknesses, ritual countermeasures, or brave heroes who can defeat them. Classic wish fulfillment fantasies. They imagine terrible dangers, then immediately imagine ways to overcome them. It's almost childlike in its optimism." The research station's central AI chimed with an update notification. New data had arrived from the Cultural Assessment Division, and the preliminary contact recommendations were ready for review. "Let me guess," Zixthala said, not bothering to check the files. "Auxiliary support roles? Light manufacturing? Perhaps waste management for the civilized worlds?" "Transportation services," Understanding corrected. 17 voices speaking in perfect harmony. "The recommendation is for humans to serve as cargo haulers and passenger transport between low-risk systems. Their psychological need to create imaginary adventures makes them suitable for the tedium of long-distance shipping. Dr. Nefis uncoiled slightly, a gesture indicating mild interest. There is one peculiarity in their mythological database that doesn't fit the standard pattern. They have extensive documentation about entities that aren't defeated by heroes. Oh. Threats that require ongoing management rather than resolution. Their vampire legends, for instance, describe creatures that can be controlled but never truly eliminated. Same with their demon hierarchies, complex bureaucratic systems for containing and redirecting supernatural threats rather than destroying them. Zixthala's harmonic frequencies shifted to a more analytical tone. Interesting. That suggests a more sophisticated understanding of persistent threats than we initially calculated. Perhaps they're suitable for long-term monitoring roles as well as transportation. The pattern appears throughout their database, Dr. Nefis continued, scales reflecting the holographic data streams. Ghosts that must be appeased rather than banished, curses that require generational management, elder gods that sleep rather than die. It's almost as if they've developed cultural frameworks for... The Serpentine researchers' words trailed off as new data cascaded across the displays. Incident reports from the outer sectors, flagged for immediate attention by the Galactic Enforcement Division. Quarantine protocols activated around 3 separate star systems. Emergency response teams requesting assistance with unspecified xenological threats. Understanding's bioforms went rigid. 17 identical faces, turning toward the incoming data streams. These incident reports are marked with threat classifications we haven't seen before. Level Omega containment failures. Level Omega? Zixthala's crystalline form brightened with alarm. Those classification levels don't exist in our database. What kind of threat requires... The research station's communication array crackled with an incoming priority message. The voice that emerged belonged to a human, which was odd since humans weren't supposed to have ships in that sector of space. Enforcement Station Gamma 7. This is Captain Rodriguez with Terran Pest Control Division. We're showing 3 active contracts in your vicinity. Advise your patrols to maintain minimum safe distance of 50,000 kilometers from the affected systems. We'll have this cleaned up in approximately 72 standard hours. The communication ended with a casual sign-off that suggested the speaker had been discussing weekend maintenance rather than cosmic-level emergencies. In the silence that followed, 3 of the galaxy's most respected xenological researchers stared at displays full of data that suddenly felt much less comprehensive than it had moments before. Pest Control Division? Dr. Nefis whispered, scales shifting to colors that indicated deep unease. Zixthala's harmonic frequencies had dropped to subsonic levels, a sign of profound confusion among the Kethvar. Did that human just refer to Level Omega containment failures as routine maintenance contracts? Understanding's 17 bioforms swayed in agitation, their perfect synchronization flickering with uncertainty. Perhaps we should reconsider our assessment of human mythology. There may be aspects of their cultural development that our analysis missed. Outside the research station's viewports, 3 star systems pulsed with the kind of energies that made veteran xenobiologists reach for emergency evacuation protocols. And somewhere in that chaos, human ships were conducting what they apparently considered pest control operations. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. Commander Vextal had patrolled the outer rim for 47 cycles, without encountering anything more dangerous than smugglers with outdated weapons and the occasional diplomatic incident involving mating rituals gone wrong. The Galactic Enforcement Cruiser, absolute authority, represented everything the civilized galaxy stood for: order, protocol, and the comfortable certainty that proper procedures could handle any situation, which made the scene before them particularly unsettling. Sir, I'm reading 17 human vessels in formation around the Kepler 442 system, reported Lieutenant Quill, her avian features ruffled with confusion. That's the dead world from the quarantine reports. Vextal's 4 arms worked the command console with practiced efficiency, calling up tactical displays that made progressively less sense. Kepler 442 had been a thriving colony world until 6 months ago, when something had killed every living thing on the surface and left the planet radiating energies that drove scanning equipment haywire. Standard enforcement protocol called for a 50,000-kilometer exclusion zone and requests for specialized containment teams from the core worlds. "Hail the lead human vessel," Vextal ordered. "They're in violation of quarantine protocols." The communication channel crackled to life, filled with background chatter that sounded disturbingly casual for a crisis zone. "Told Martinez to bring extra grade 7 containment units, but does he listen? No, he brings grade 5s and now we're running short on—" The voice paused. "Oh, hey there, enforcement. This is Foreman Chen with Hyperion Industrial Cleaning Services. You folks need to clear the area. We've got a Class C infestation that's about to get messy." Lieutenant Quill's feathers stood completely on end. "Class C infestation?" "Sir, the classification system only goes up to Class A threats." "Negative, Hyperion vessel," Vextal transmitted back. "This system is under galactic quarantine. You are ordered to withdraw immediately for your own safety." The human's laughter came through clearly over the comm. "Safety? Boss, you might want to check your threat assessment database. We've been handling Shoggoth cleanup for 3 generations. This one's barely a medium-grade job." "Shoggoth?" Vextal's translator struggled with the unfamiliar term before providing a definition that made his secondary hearts skip several beats. "You're claiming the threat on that world matches mythological descriptions from your species' folklore." "Mythological?" Another voice joined the channel, this one female with an accent that suggested origin from Earth's northern continents. "Chief Engineer Okafor here. Sir, with respect, there's nothing mythological about a rogue bioform that can reshape matter at the molecular level. We've got 12 teams down there right now setting up resonance scramblers." The tactical display updated with new information as human ships deployed in precise formations around the dead world. Energy signatures that had been chaotic and impossible to interpret suddenly resolved into patterns that suggested organized activity rather than random destruction. "Lieutenant," Vextal said quietly, "run a cross-reference between the energy readings from Kepler 442 and the mythological database from that human research assessment." Quill's talons clicked nervously across her console. "Sir, the resonance patterns match something called an amorphous horror with 93% accuracy. The biorhythmic signatures are consistent with descriptions of things that should not be from human folklore dating back 12,000 standard years." On the main display, they watched human teams working methodically across the planet's surface. Whatever they were doing involved equipment that generated controlled reality, distortions, technology that shouldn't exist according to every galactic scientific principle. "Hyperion vessels, explain your operational procedures," Vextal demanded. "How are your teams surviving exposure to whatever destroyed this colony?" "Standard protective gear," Foreman Chen replied, matter-of-factly. "Psychic dampeners, reality anchors, emergency banishment kits. Same equipment we used on the Aldebaran situation last month, and that mess in the Vega system before that." Lieutenant Quill pulled up enforcement incident reports, her beak clicking rapidly as she processed the data. "Sir, there have been 14 quarantine events in the past 8 months. In every case, human vessels appeared shortly after the initial threat assessment, and the situations resolved within a week." "Resolved how?" "The files are classified above our clearance level, but—" Quill's feathers flattened against her skull. "The incident reports are all signed off by the same department, Terran Pest Control Division." The communication channel buzzed with activity as the human teams coordinated their efforts. Technical jargon flowed freely. Terms like dimensional stabilizers and eldritch containment fields, discussed with the same casual professionalism that sanitation workers might use to describe waste management procedures. Got a breakthrough on the northwest quadrant. Looks like the spawn cluster extends deeper than initial surveys indicated. We're going to need the heavy resonance equipment. Copy that. Team 7, prep the sonic disruption array, and somebody tell Rookie Johnson to stop trying to make eye contact with the peripheral manifestations. We've been over this in training. Vextal found himself accessing files he'd never needed before. Historical records of species that had simply vanished from the galaxy, leaving behind only empty worlds and energy signatures that defied analysis. Worlds that had been quietly reclassified as resolved in recent decades. Hyperion Control, he transmitted, his voice carefully neutral. How many similar operations has your organization conducted? This fiscal year? Chen here. Let me check. We're at about 430 successful containments, with another 67 cases transferred to our long-term management division. Pretty standard numbers for this sector. 430. Lieutenant Quill was accessing galactic threat databases with increasing urgency, cross-referencing incident reports with human shipping manifests and corporate registration data. The pattern that emerged suggested an industry that had been operating quietly in the background of galactic civilization for decades. Sir, Quill whispered, humans have been handling cosmic-level threats as commercial contracts. There are entire sectors of space that are only habitable because of ongoing human pest control operations. On the tactical display, the chaos around Kepler 442 was steadily resolving into organized patterns. Human teams worked with the efficiency of professionals who had done this countless times before, deploying technologies that turned reality-warping horrors into manageable industrial problems. Enforcement vessel, Foreman Chen's voice crackled through the comm one final time. You might want to update your database. Turns out there's a whole category of threats your classification system missed. Lucky for you, we've got it covered. The communication ended, leaving Commander Vextal staring at displays full of data that suggested the galaxy's understanding of cosmic threats was not just incomplete, but fundamentally wrong. Outside the viewport, human ships continued their methodical work, treating entities that could end civilizations like any other occupational hazard. The emergency session of the Galactic Threat Assessment Bureau had been called at 0347 Standard Galactic Time, which meant that Director Caney's morning stimulants hadn't kicked in yet. This was unfortunate, because the holographic conference table was currently surrounded by the galaxy's most paranoid intelligence analysts, and they were all talking at once. 17 separate incidents of impossible threat neutralization, energy signatures that match no known physics, humans responding to alerts before we even issue them. Quiet! Caney's voice carried the authority of someone who had spent 50 years turning chaos into comprehensible reports for beings who preferred their universe to make sense. The babble ceased immediately. Agent Thross, you called this meeting. Explain why I'm not in my office drinking coffee and pretending that space remains a predictable place. Agent Thross was a Zephyrian, which meant he communicated through shifting patterns of bioluminescent spots across his translucent skin. Currently, those patterns suggested extreme agitation mixed with professional bewilderment. Director, we've been tracking anomalies in threat response patterns across 47 sectors. Every time we detect a potential civilization-ending event, human ships arrive on scene before our own assessment teams. Human ships, repeated Agent Villara, her cybernetic implants clicking as she processed data streams. From a species we classified as transportation specialists 6 months ago. Caney activated the central holographic display, which immediately filled with incident reports that painted a picture of systematic impossibility. Show me. The first file materialized, a dying binary star system where reality had begun folding in on itself, creating recursive temporal loops that trapped entire worlds in causal paradoxes. Standard galactic response time, 14 days to assemble a research team. Human response time, 6 hours, followed by successful stabilization using equipment that generated controlled temporal anomalies. The physics don't work. Agent Thross's bioluminescent display pulsed with frustrated colors. They're using technology that creates localized violations of causality to fix causality violations. It's like using fire to put out fire. The second file showed surveillance footage from the Perseus arm. Something had emerged from a collapsed hyperdimension and begun converting matter into geometries that existed in 17 different spatial orientations simultaneously. The visual distortions alone had driven 3 survey teams insane. Human response involved teams wearing modified sensory equipment, casually discussing non-Euclidean standard procedures while they herded impossible angles back into their native dimension. Notice the terminology. Agent Velara highlighted portions of the intercepted communications. They don't call them unknowable cosmic horrors. They call them Type 7 geometrical hazards, and reference standard operating procedures that apparently everyone on their teams has memorized. Caney rubbed his temples, feeling the onset of the kind of headache that came from trying to reconcile bureaucratic reality with actual reality. Are you telling me that humans have developed industrial solutions for threats that we didn't even know existed? The third file contained data that made the previous incidents look mundane. A region of space where stars were spontaneously developing consciousness and forming aggressive collective intelligences. The galactic response involved evacuating 17 systems and establishing a permanent exclusion zone. The human response involved something they called stellar psychotherapy, followed by successful negotiation of a non-aggression pact. Stellar psychotherapy, Caney said slowly. They talked a group of sentient stars out of destroying inhabited worlds. The conversation logs are available, Agent Thross indicated, his patterns shifting to display academic interest. Apparently, the stars were experiencing something analogous to adolescent rebellion after achieving consciousness. The human negotiation team included specialists in cosmic scale psychology and interstellar family counseling. Agent Velara's implants chimed with incoming data. I've been cross-referencing human personnel records with our incident database. The teams responding to these events aren't military or research divisions. They're civilian contractors from something called the Existential Hazard Management Institute. Civilian contractors, Caney repeated, handling threats that could sterilize galaxies. Director? Agent Thross's bioluminescence shifted to urgent warning patterns. There's something else. I've been analyzing the frequency of these incidents over time. Cosmic-level threats have been occurring at a steady rate for millennia, but our detection rate only started climbing 18 months ago. The implications hung in the air like toxic gas. Agent Velara was the first to voice what they were all thinking. The threats aren't new. Our ability to detect them is new because humans stopped handling them. Quietly, Caney finished. They used to resolve these situations before we even knew they existed. The central display updated with a new analysis, a comprehensive timeline showing the correlation between human shipping routes and regions of space that remained mysteriously stable despite being adjacent to cosmic horror events. Trade routes that passed within light years of reality tiers, dimensional breaches, and space-time anomalies without reporting any difficulties. They've been running logistics through hazardous cosmic terrain for decades, Agent Thross observed. What we classified as low-risk shipping lanes were actually corridors that required constant maintenance by specialized teams. Agent Velara accessed another data stream, her expression growing increasingly grim. I'm seeing references to something called the night shift, human crews that work exclusively in regions of space that our navigation computers mark as avoid at all costs. They're not avoiding the dangers. They're managing them. The final piece of the puzzle materialized as a classified report from the Human Colonial Administration, marked with security clearances that shouldn't exist for a species that had been relegated to transportation services. Listen to this, Caney read from the document. Annual performance review for Sector 7 Nightmare Management Division. Successfully maintained reality stability in 1,247 systems, prevented 89 apocalyptic entity breaches, and negotiated peaceful relocations for 34 cosmic horrors seeking new dimensional territories. Total budget expenditure, within normal parameters for routine maintenance operations. Routine maintenance operations, Agent Villara whispered. They're treating the prevention of universal extinction events as routine maintenance. The conference room fell silent except for the soft hum of processing systems trying to recalculate threat assessments based on this new understanding. Somewhere in the galactic database, algorithms were quietly reclassifying humanity from auxiliary support species to something that didn't have a proper designation yet. Director, Agent Thross's patterns had shifted to colors indicating deep philosophical uncertainty. If humans have been preventing cosmic-level disasters as standard practice, what does that make the rest of us? Caney looked at the data streams flowing across his displays, incident reports that painted a picture of a universe far more dangerous than anyone had imagined, kept stable by a species that everyone had dismissed as harmlessly primitive. Protected, he said finally. It makes us protected. The emergency klaxons throughout Galactic Central Command had been wailing for 18 minutes, which was 17 minutes longer than any crisis in recorded history had lasted before someone found a solution. High Chancellor Mordeth stood before the tactical displays, watching civilized space tear itself apart in real time, and wondered if this was how empires always ended. Not with conquest, but with the discovery that their entire existence had been built on a foundation they never understood. Status report, Mordeth commanded, though the displays made the situation abundantly clear. Reality was unraveling across 12 major systems simultaneously, and the entities responsible were unlike anything in the Galactic Threat database. General Vexthon's voice cracked with barely controlled panic. The breaches are expanding exponentially. We've lost contact with Proxima Station, and the evacuation fleets from Beta Reticuli are reporting that space itself is becoming hostile to their presence. On the main screen, impossible geometries twisted through normal space, turning starships into abstract art and transforming inhabited worlds into recursive mathematical problems. The evacuation fleets were trying to escape something that existed in too many dimensions to properly perceive, let alone fight. Our best xenological teams are requesting immediate transfer to psychiatric facilities, reported Admiral Cathera, her crystalline form flickering with stress patterns. Apparently, direct observation of these entities causes permanent cognitive restructuring. Where are the specialized containment teams from the core worlds? Mordeth demanded. En route, but their estimated arrival time is 72 hours. Sir, we don't have 72 hours. We don't have 72 minutes. The tactical display updated with new horror. The entities were moving with purpose rather than random destruction. They were actively seeking out populated systems, bypassing empty space to focus on regions with complex technological signatures. Civilized space wasn't just under attack. It was being deliberately harvested. Sir? General Vexthon's voice carried the hollow tone of someone delivering a death sentence. I'm receiving a priority transmission from the Human Colonial Administration. Patch it through. The voice that emerged from the communication array belonged to someone who sounded distinctly unimpressed by the current crisis. Galactic Command, this is Director Walsh from Terran Crisis Management. We're showing multiple Category X breaches in your territory. Are you folks planning to handle this internally, or do you need professional assistance? The casualness of the question struck the command center like a physical blow. Category X breaches. They had terminology for this. Director Walsh. Mordeth's voice carried every ounce of authority he could muster. We are experiencing unprecedented cosmic-level threats that appear to be beyond current galactic response capabilities. Right, the Outer Dark incursion. Yeah, we've been tracking that buildup for about 6 months. Honestly surprised it took this long to manifest. The dimensional barrier degradation was pretty obvious if you knew what to look for. Admiral Cathara stepped forward, her form brightening with desperate hope. You can stop this? Stop it? Ma'am, this is what we do. The real question is whether you want the economy package or the full restoration service. General Vex Thon leaned over his communication console. Explain the difference. Economy package. We push the entities back to their native dimension and reinforce the barriers. Problem solved for the next century or so, minimal collateral damage. Full restoration involves tracking down whatever weakened the dimensional integrity in the first place and implementing permanent preventive measures. On the tactical display, entire star systems were winking out of normal space-time as the incursion accelerated. Mordeth found himself asking a question he never imagined would be necessary. How quickly can you begin operations? We've got 3 heavy containment fleets in your vicinity already, just waiting for authorization to begin active suppression. Should have the immediate crisis stabilized within about 4 hours, assuming standard resistance patterns. 3 fleets? Admiral Cathara's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. Our sensors show no human vessels in this sector. That's because they're operating in folded space, Director Walsh explained with the patience of someone talking to a child. Hard to detect reality stabilization equipment when it exists in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Professional necessity when you're dealing with entities that can perceive normal space-time. The communication crackled with background chatter as human teams coordinated their response. Terms like existential anchor points and causal loop stabilizers flowed freely, discussed with the same matter-of-fact professionalism that logistics coordinators might use to plan shipping schedules. Director Walsh, Mordeth said carefully, how long has humanity been managing these types of threats? Officially, about 12,000 years, give or take. Unofficially, probably since we developed tool use. Hard to build a civilization when reality keeps trying to eat you, so we got good at making it stop. The tactical display suddenly shifted as new contacts appeared throughout the affected systems. Human vessels materialized from folded space, deploying in formations that suggested they had been preparing for this specific scenario. The chaos of the incursion began to resolve into organized patterns as specialized equipment created zones of stable reality. The dimensional breaches are contracting, General Vex Thon reported, his voice filled with wonder. Whatever they're doing, it's working. Standard procedure. Director Walsh's voice carried the satisfaction of a job well done. The tricky part isn't pushing the Outer Dark entities back. It's making sure they don't get cranky about it and try to return next week. We'll need to implement some long-term monitoring stations in the affected regions. Mordeth watched as human teams worked with impossible efficiency, turning universal extinction into an administrative problem. Director Walsh, why didn't humanity inform the Galactic Council about the existence of these threats? The pause that followed suggested the question had genuinely confused the human administrator. Sir, with respect, we assumed you knew. Every inhabited world deals with reality breaches eventually. We just figured you were handling yours quietly, like everyone else. Everyone else? Sure. The Andromedans have their Void Shepherds. The Magellanics run those stellar consciousness management programs. The local group collective maintains their entropy regulation systems. Wait. Another pause, this one distinctly more concerned. Are you telling me that you folks don't have cosmic horror management systems? The command center fell silent except for the soft hum of displays showing human teams successfully containing entities that had been tearing reality apart minutes before. "Director Walsh," Admiral Cathara said slowly, "what did you think the galactic civilization was?" "A safe zone," came the immediate reply. "You know, the nice, quiet neighborhood where civilized folks can live without having to worry about their local space-time getting eaten by interdimensional parasites. We've been maintaining the buffer zones around your territory for decades." The final piece fell into place with the weight of revelation. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations existed in a pocket of artificially maintained stability, protected by beings they had dismissed as primitive transporters. Every thriving world, every great achievement of science and culture, every monument to galactic civilization. All of it made possible by humans treating cosmic horrors like routine maintenance problems. "Sir," General Vexthon's voice was barely a whisper. "The threat assessment reports we've been receiving. They're not intelligence briefings." "No," Mordeth realized, understanding flooding through him. "They're invoices." Director Walsh's voice crackled through the communication array one final time, carrying the cheerful professionalism of someone wrapping up another successful workday. "Galactic Command, this is crisis management. Area is secure, entities have been relocated to appropriate dimensional territories, and reality stability is back within normal parameters. We'll forward the service report to your accounting department. Oh, and you might want to update your threat assessment protocols. Apparently there's a whole category of cosmic dangers your databases are missing." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in contemplative silence. Outside the viewports, stars that had been twisted into impossible configurations were quietly resuming their normal behavior, and space itself was remembering how to exist in only 3 dimensions. Mordeth looked at his officers, representatives of the galaxy's most sophisticated civilizations, and saw the same dawning comprehension in every face. They had spent millennia measuring strength by technological advancement and territorial control, never realizing that true strength was measured by the ability to make the universe safe for everyone else. Humanity had never been weak. They had simply been so effective at their job that everyone else forgot how dangerous the universe actually was. And that, Mordeth reflected as he watched human ships fade back into folded space, was probably the most human thing of all, solving everyone's problems so efficiently that no one realized there had been problems to begin with.